Hi everyone, I'm Derek.
And I'm Laura. Welcome to Choices for Life Online. And just in case you don't know, Choices for Life is all about giving you accurate information on the use and misuse of alcohol, drugs and tobacco.
In this show, we will be looking at legal and illegal drugs, how they affect you and the dangers you might face. We'll also be dispelling a few urban myths.
That's right. And to help us with that, we have a panel of experts who will tell you all you need to know about stimulants, solvents and so-called legal highs.
Now we're being joined by our panel of experts, a couch full of them in fact. Welcome Dr. Richard Stevenson. Richard is a specialist doctor working in the A&E department of Glasgow Royal Infirmary. We also have Detective Constable Kenny Foy from Police Scotland.
And Katie McLeod in the middle is the National Training and Development Officer for the Scottish Drugs Forum. She specialises in novel psychoactive substances, psychostimulants, harm reduction and poly-drug use. And behind Katie we have Marina Clayton, the Development Manager for Resolve, an organisation that provides training and information around solvent misuse.
And finally, we have Jeremy Sayre. Jeremy is a member of the Angelus Foundation, which is dedicated to raising awareness about new drugs with young people and their parents.
Welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us. Now, we've asked pupils from Annan Academy and Hazelhead Academy to send in some video questions specifically on so-called legal highs. So let's take a look at the first one.
What are legal highs?
Well, that's a good one to start with. So firstly, maybe Kenny, you can help us with this one.
Legal highs are drugs or products that are made to look and mimic like drugs and sold on the internet or through shops.
Okay. Have we got another question?
Why are legal highs dangerous?
So why are legal highs dangerous? Definitely a question for you, Richard.
The problem with legal highs is that we just don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. We can't test for them when people take them. But what we've seen with certain chemicals is that they actually have killed young people who've been trying to take them recreationally.
Okay, so in my understanding, we were chatting a wee bit earlier, legal highs, these drugs that are made to look like certain other drugs perhaps, we don't know what's in them and people are just putting, would you say they're putting anything in just so they can sell them?
Absolutely. I mean, in some of all you're getting is caffeine, but in others we're getting really quite poisonous chemicals that even as doctors we have no experience of what they do on humans. And when they present to us, they're really quite ill. And the people are taking them thinking they're maybe buying something else. But then when they come to us, unfortunately, they come in very sick. And unfortunately, we can't save people when they're poisoned with them.
Gosh, and what kind of effects might it have? You know, it might sound a bit gory, but what sort of things would they
No, I think you're right to raise this point. So when people come in, there's a range of symptoms. But from the most severe side, what we've seen is kids coming in, or even young adults as well, very confused. They come in, they're fighting, they don't know what they're doing. They're confused, aggressive, they're fighting with the police, they're fighting with us when we're trying to help them. Their body temperatures start to rise to a dangerous level, and then that causes their muscles to effectively liquefy. So their muscles break down, and that leads to multi-organ failure. Their kidneys block up, kidneys stop working, their livers fail. And then unfortunately, they go to intensive care if they survive that, but they're dying 3 or 4 days later. Blood is being excreted from them, their kidneys stop working, their bowels are sloughing off. It's a horrendous way to die.
Gosh.
That's terrible. So it's a bit of a guessing game really, you know, if someone was to take a pill, for example, you know, it's do or die, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way to predict who's going to have a bad response to these pills and who's going to be okay with them.
Yeah.
There's certainly a problem with the dose, how many pills people take in one time. But there's also individual factors as well, and they're also taken with other drugs, you know, and by that we mean alcohol. So when people do drink alcohol, their inhibitions are loosened. They might not remember they've taken a couple of pills before, and they're taking extra to keep going. But yeah, it's a very serious problem for us.
Wow, that's a great answer, thank you. And we've got a VT question coming up.
What kind of legal highs are there and how do you use them?
So what kind of legal highs are there and how do you use them? Maybe Katie, you can answer that question.
Sure. So there's different types, and as Kenny said earlier, really they mimic the effects of illegal drugs. So there's drugs that replicate what ecstasy does, there's drugs that replicate what cannabis does, cocaine, and other drugs like LSD or magic mushrooms. There's psychedelic kinds of these drugs.
And are these, maybe these are kind of things that I've certainly seen being sold at festivals, things like that. I don't think they do it anymore. But years ago you would see legal highs, all this sort of stuff, and it seemed like quite a a safe way of people just to have a bit of extra fun. I think. Would you say that is completely abolished now?
It's not as easy to get them at festivals, is my understanding. People tend to buy them online. They buy them from shops, but often they buy from their friends, just as they would other drugs as well. So often it's, it could be a dealer, but it easily just could be one of their friends, an older sibling or something like that as well.
And for you, Marina, legal highs, there's solvents obviously, and these products are not illegal products. Sniffing glue, things like that. These are products that you can buy in the shops, but I guess it's how they're being used that is dangerous.
Exactly. I mean, there's nothing. Solvent abuse sits within the drug agenda, and they're not drugs, and right there is one of the biggest issues. These are consumer products that are used to get a buzz, basically, but very, very dangerous.
I've got a question for you here, Marina. What is nitrous oxide?
Nitrous oxide is laughing gas. Some people call it hippie crack. N20 is the sort of chemical formula, so that'll be familiar maybe within chemistry lessons, but laughing gas, which does have a medical application, if a woman's in labour she'll be given gas and air, but laughing gas in terms of use has really, really increased in recent years, and some reports it's second only to cannabis. For use in festivals and things like that, but can be extremely dangerous. What keeps laughing gas or nitrous oxide safe in a medical application is a mix with oxygen, but in festivals, of course, that's not happening, and people do and have died.
How would they die from that?
It's basically displacing oxygen, but nitrous also
starving
has
the brain, really. Right.
And it also has an impact on the gasp reflex of the body as well, but it's simply a lack of oxygen. Basically, yeah.
So, Jeremy, can you answer for us, what do legal highs actually look like?
No, they look like the illegal counterparts. So the fake cannabis is essentially a chemical that's sprayed on a plant product that looks a bit like cannabis, but has absolutely nothing to do. And it's sold as herbal, as if it's some kind of natural product. It's about as natural as creosote. It's the opposite.
And yourself, Kenny, you obviously come into contact with a lot of these substances through your work. They're taking forms of, a lot of them taking forms of pills as well, I guess.
Powder form seems to be very popular, and the herbal material that would be made to look like herbal cannabis, and it can be any product that would look like kitchen herbs that they will spray or put another product onto and then sell as a herbal product or an incense product. Most of the packaging, in fact all of the packaging that I've seen, all states not for human consumption on the packaging, yet they are being abused.
So they're putting not for human consumption. Why? To save their own backs? For these people
One
to
way,
go...
yeah, it's to for them to sell it as a product that they would use as a human, they have to meet certain regulations. These products don't meet any of those regulations, so by putting not for human consumption on it, they bypass a certain part of the regulations.
And Kenny, what's the process if someone gets caught with a legal high?
Well, a recent study that we carried out showed that 20% or a fifth of all the legal highs that we had recovered, that we had sampled and sent to our laboratories, come back containing a controlled drug. So they actually contain a illicit drug or a controlled drug controlled within the Misuse of Drugs Act.
Is legal high the right term to use?
There's an implication that there's been a process whereby they've been considered legal, therefore there's a feeling of safety about them. But because there's so much lack of knowledge on them, they're actually riskier than the other drugs. Yeah,
because rightly so, it sounds as if it's gone through some sort of vetting, like, it's a legal high, so it means that it must have been tested and it's maybe good for you. I don't know, do people think that?
I don't think they think they're good for them, but they have a misconception that they think they're safer because they think, well, if they were dangerous, they'd be made illegal. But that's not the case, and we don't have antidotes, we don't have cures for these poisonings, apart from a very select few. And when people come into us, there is nothing we can do. We try and cool them down, we're trying to sedate them, etc. but we're seeing people dying in front of us, you know.
So you literally, somebody comes into A&E and you can tell that they have taken something. Would they normally tell you? Would they say, I've taken whatever, maybe what the buzzword is of it, but they would maybe say, I've taken something. But if they maybe said to you, I've taken cocaine, would you treat them for that? But it was maybe what they thought was cocaine, but it's not. You know, it must be so difficult.
You're right, it is
to
difficult.
Save somebody's life.
Yeah, and even if they say, well, I took product X, then we know from previous studies that product X might be one thing one week and then something totally different the next.
Yeah.
So there's no consistency with what people are buying.
Yeah.
And when they do present to us, often they can't tell us what they've taken because they're so unwell.
Yeah.
That's absolutely frightening. But we've got another question here.
How come you can buy legal highs online and in shops?
How come we can buy legal highs online and in shops?
The law can't keep up with the rate of new drugs coming through. So it's impossible for the authorities to actually impose bans on them. And as soon as there is a ban imposed, then new products appear within a few days.
Gosh, and I'm guessing you can't, a lot of the solvents and things, you can just buy.
How do you control
that?
Products? How do you control aerosols?
Yeah.
People have, when you think about the average household, these things are absolutely everywhere, and there's such a lot of misunderstanding about solvent abuse. There's an idea that it's the glue sniffing of the past, which still happens, as I said, but it's not really the biggest product. It's aerosols and butane gas canisters, and that's just buying in shops. Then you've got online. You've got self-serve, of course, as well in supermarkets, and bog off 2 for 1 or 3 for 2, and all of these things.
So how common is solvent abuse?
It's an incredibly difficult thing to estimate because very often it's experimental, once or twice. So that's never going to show up in any kind of data, although we do have school surveys that do give us an idea. So sort of 2-3% will admit to trying at least once in their lifetime. The problem with that group of solvents, because it's a huge group of products, but the aerosols and butane is that one-time can and does kill. That's why it's so dangerous, so difficult to control, threat of death each and every time. Thankfully, it is often only experimentally tried, and thankfully most young people don't try at all because it's so difficult to how do you ban aerosol products?
Yeah. It's such a risk because you can just like do it once and that's
exactly like that. Exactly like that, yeah.
And you've got things like glue in schools, you know, so it's...
Well, glues, it's not so much commercial glues now, it's more industrial that you might buy in a DIY store, so it's not commercial glues, but lots and lots of different products, absolutely everywhere. So, and then you've got poppers as well, which is also solvent abuse, and you get that in head shops and what have you too. So,
what is a popper? What is it used for? What is it actually?
It's a short-acting, has a short-acting stimulant effect. Used in some situations in particular types of practice, it dilates blood vessels, but short-acting stimulant. But Richard had been saying earlier, there's been quite a spike in admissions.
With people think that because poppers are so easy to get hold of that they're safe. But
what is it used for in real? You know, if it's not used to be a drug, what is it? What is a popper?
There is no regular use for it.
So people, it's not. Are they illegal then?
No, they're not illegal. They're sold as room odorizers.
Right. So, but do people use what to make a nice smell in a room? Is that
they don't smell nice?
No,
they don't smell nice. And the problem is that when you get a certain threshold in your bloodstream, it affects your body, the ability of the body to transport oxygen in the blood, and then we have to give certain antidotes to try and counteract that. But there is no medical use or industrial use for these chemicals for human consumption at all.
So poppers are purely made to be a drug?
They're classed as a room odorizer,
right.
And it says, do not inhale the contents from this bottle. But people are, and then some people mistakenly drink them because they think that will actually make them work quicker and more effective. But actually that becomes a life-threatening complication, and people have died from these particular products.
Okay, I think we have another question.
Is there any information within schools about legal highs?
One for you,
Information in
Katie,
schools.
possibly.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of charities that go and do drugs information, and Scottish Drugs Forum would be one of those organisations that provide information. A lot of information is given out by teachers as well that will do drug education sessions, but there's certainly websites that can be accessed through the SDF website, where you can find out more about support in your area as well, and the address for that's sdf.org.uk.
What would someone do if you know a pupil do if they found a pill or something what they thought was drugs? What should they do?
Well, it would depend on the circumstances. If they were at school, then take it to a guidance teacher, or take it to somewhere that they may have a sin bin or a bin that they would put products like that in. If it's outside, by all means, take it to your local police office. Make sure it gets dealt with safely and disposed of safely.
And kids, you know, they shouldn't feel scared to go to the police, you know, with something to take it. They shouldn't feel scared, like, I'm going to get arrested for blah, blah, blah. They shouldn't feel scared. They should just do it.
If they're taking it to their local police station and they're taking it there to hand it in, then they've got nothing to worry about.
OK, let's get another question from VT.
What are the long-term health effects of legal highs and are they addictive?
That's an interesting question, because are legal highs addictive?
Yes. It depends on the certain type of legal high. That without question, some are just as addictive as other drugs that people may be more familiar with, like cocaine, Valium or heroin. The problem is that these are often what they call flash-in-the-pan type drugs, so they suddenly have a brief surge in use and then they disappear and they're replaced by something else. Okay. They're certainly much more toxic in the acute phase rather than addictive per se, but there is help out there, and Katie works with organisations that are involved in helping people who find themselves unfortunately addicted.
Thank you. And if we can get another question on VT.
Are legal highs cheaper than illegal drugs?
Are legal highs cheaper than illegal drugs?
They're extremely cheap to manufacture, and the sale price is very often a little bit lower, so they're more affordable. But it certainly underlines that the whole process whereby people are actually buying things that cost pennies is that they're being totally ripped off they're not doing anything which is cheeky or naughty. They're being made to be fools, really.
Okay. And who can have access to these legal highs? Is there an age limit, or what's...
I mean, you know, Kenny mentioned the packaging. They often say it should only be for over 18s, but you know, again, that's not always enforced. That comes down to whoever sells them. You know, and again, if people are buying online, it's difficult to
monitor.
Yeah, to monitor an age restriction. I would certainly stress that they're more riskier the younger that you're using them, as with any drug, because your brain is still developing. So, you know, using drugs while your brain is still developing is risky for any type of drug, legal or illegal as well.
Mm-hmm. We've got another question on VT.
Why are legal highs dangerous?
So, yeah, I mean, we've touched on it, but, you know, if you can just sum up why legal highs are...
One of the dangers is you just don't know what you're getting. That's one of the major things. But also we're seeing now younger people are coming in, and some people now are developing mental illness at a very, very young age, and often it's very difficult to treat it because their personalities are developing, their brain's developing, as Katie says, and if you impair that process at such an early stage, that's you affected for more or less the rest of your life. So in addition to the acute effects, the acute poisons where people die, there are other effects as well that we're only just starting to learn about since we've had more experience on treating these people. But personally, we're seeing younger and younger children using these drugs, you know, even at the ages of 9 or 10, and coming to hospital extremely unwell. And the impact, not only just on themselves as well, but the impact on their family, on their brothers, their sisters, it's very upsetting to see them in that state. You know, when you see a 15-year-old boy lying in intensive care on a ventilator, you know, his bowel is broken down, and he is just leaking blood from everywhere, you know, and there is no way to bring him back, and it's just watching him die in front of you. It's incredibly distressing. It's distressing for family, it's distressing for the people looking after him as well, when it can be avoided. You know, you do have a choice in this matter, and it's important to make the right choice.
Can you get ecstasy in any other form other than pill form?
Yeah, Kenny's seen a variety of forms, haven't you?
Yeah, recently we've seen crystallised ecstasy or crystallised MDMA, which is the chemical compound name for ecstasy, and we've seen it as a powdered form as well.
So would that be to, like mimic cocaine, basically?
No, that would be sold as ecstasy.
As ecstasy, but in powder form?
Just in a different form.
So you can get it in powder form?
Yeah.
Gee, oh. Wow, I think we've got one more question on VT. I'm just being told in my right ear.
Why do shops and internet suppliers sell legal highs, and who monitors it?
No one monitors it. And they sell it because they're, at present, because, as I explained earlier, they've all been marked not for human consumption. They will have an age rate on them. They're not breaking any retail law by selling them at present, because they're not selling it for humans to take and use. They're sold as room odorisers or herbal incense, something that you shouldn't physically put in your body. However, when people do, that's when the problems start.
If somebody then was selling cocaine, and this is just a question, if somebody was selling cocaine and they put it in a packet and it's an illegal drug and they said not for human consumption, would that have any, what would that do?
No, cocaine's controlled under the Misuse of Drugs Act as a Class A drug.
Fine.
So
that would have been malicious, no matter what, that would have been
still
completely illegal, and it wouldn't have done, that wouldn't protect the dealer, if you know what I mean.
No, absolutely not. And as I said earlier, some of these legal highs or research chemicals or novel psychoactive substances have returned from our laboratories stating that they have a controlled drug in them. So even by the very nature that they're called legal highs, doesn't mean that they won't contain a controlled drug, which inevitably could lead to a prosecution for you having that product on you.
Lastly, Jeremy, do you think that the press and the media could be doing more around this issue?
They can always be doing more because they like to exaggerate the risks. But with this issue, I think the risks are higher than many other drugs, because the questions that people might ask when they're taking a drug would be, how long does it take to start? Yeah. How long does it last? What are the side effects? What are the possible harms? And with these substances, the answer is almost always, I don't know, because they're so inconsistent from product to product.
Gosh, well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It's been really great. And that's all the questions that we've got time for, unfortunately. But a big thank you to the S3 and S4s of Hazelhead Academy in Aberdeen and Annan Academy. Thanks, guys.
And a big thank you to Jeremy, Katie, Kenny, Marina and Richard. Thanks very much, guys, for coming in.